All aboard! Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, football fans of all ages and IMBs, Mikey, you have now arrived at my train of thought. It's time to talk about week number 12, and we're going to waste no more time because we got Thanksgiving Day games to talk about tomorrow in the power rankings. Let's get to business. Now, teams didn't really catch too many beatdowns this week. In fact, there was really only one team that caught one. I'll get to them later. But there were a couple of quarterbacks that took beatings, and I'm going to need the kids to help me with this one.
Stop! He's already dead.
I appreciate y'all. Thank you very much. Hopefully y'all enjoy your Thanksgiving holidays. And Josh Allen may need an ice pack or an ice bath or something, or just jump in an ice pond. The point is, LeBron might have been onto something when he did his counting during the Heat celebration when he, Bosh, and Wade came together. How many times did Josh Allen get sacked? Not 2, not 3, not 4, not 5, not 6, not 7, 8. 8 sacks were taken by Josh Allen. Will Anderson and Danielle Hunter were basically unblockable, especially by Spencer Brown. Whoever was lining up against him was feasting and was basically racing to get to Allen in the backfield. Khalil Shakir aside, the Bills' receiving core really couldn't do much of anything. James Cook really didn't do much at all against the Texan defense. That was really where the problem lies. And for Davis Mills, he didn't crash the car, which is really all he needed to do as long as he was able to stand upright, which he was the entire game. Buffalo couldn't sack him. And this still, even with all of that, all the advantages Houston had on defense, it came down to the last drive anyway. Great hook and ladder play, and then a duck of an interception where Josh Allen obviously had a wide open Dawson Knox, and it was interference anyway, so it wouldn't have counted, but at least the interception wouldn't have counted, and Buffalo loses a game they probably shouldn't have, or at least in theory shouldn't have. This was a devastating loss for Buffalo, and their chances of winning the division are almost basically done, and their chances of going to the playoffs are fading a little bit more by the week. For Houston, you survive again, and you're going to have to make up some ground on the Colts and make it up fast. Fortunately, you've got them twice coming up. I probably will be talking about both of those games when applicable. Staying in the AFC South, Tennessee did not take a beatdown, which was a little surprising to me. I thought Tennessee was going to catch an absolute annihilation from Seattle, who's been coming in white hot since last week. And Sam Darnold, because he didn't make too many mistakes, was able to cook and cook often. Jackson Smith-Njigba already has 1,300 yards receiving. He's already broken the Seahawks record for receiving yards in a year, and we still got a half dozen games to go on his part. He's going to probably win Offensive Player of the Year and probably be nowhere close to the MVP, I would like to think. Unless he gets 2,000 yards receiving, at which point you really might have to consider JSN. He's been that good. And for Tennessee, Cam Ward was actually somewhat respectable in this game. He wasn't going to win this game. Seattle was the far better team, but he didn't do anything completely outrageously dumb. He was actually halfway decent. Good work. They tried to get down the field. They actually scored late to cut the lead to a one-score game, but Seattle held on and kept it moving. This was at least a necessary win for Seattle. And for Tennessee, okay, you still only have one win, but Cam Ward looked promising. And sometimes that's all you need for a team that's not going to really do much of anything record-wise. Speaking of teams that aren't going to do much of anything record-wise, there are the Bengals, who may get Joe Burrow back for Thanksgiving against the Ravens. But in the meantime, between time, there was a different Joe, obviously Flacco, who played a little bit shorthanded. There was no Jamar Chase, and T. Higgins got hurt part of the way through this game with a concussion. So now your two really good wide receivers are out, and Flacco and the Bengals have to navigate this. Both QBs threw pick sixes early, which weren't great, especially Mays. Mays was pretty awful, and then Flacco responded in kind and didn't look off the corner, and that was a wrap. And for New England, sure, they were able to survive and advance, and sure, the schedule merchants now have 10 wins. They're the first team in the NFL to get there. But they did have a loss, a potentially devastating one. We're still waiting on the word on what happened to him, but it could be really bad. It could be a torn ACL. He could be done for the year. And if so, it's a major loss because he was looking like a really good pick and a really good starting right tackle for a Patriots team whose offensive line has held up very well thus far this season. I'm pretty sure that the Patriots don't want to see what happened with Justin Herbert on a weekly basis, where Herbert just takes a beating. I'm pretty sure Herbert got sacked 3 or 4 times during this bye week. There will be no Charger game to talk about it here. Anyway, the Bengals season's pretty much cooked, and I would probably feel much better for their sake if Joe Flacco just rode this out and Burrow could just rest up and get ready to go for the 26th season. Their season's basically done. I mentioned Baltimore, and obviously this is a good segue between AFC North and East, as the North this time gets the W here against the East. And for the Jets, this was a very maddening performance simply because this was a very winnable game. Just too many mistakes and too many killer ones. They actually played really good defense against Baltimore in the first half. They were able to keep them at bay, and they were able to get the ball nicely to Adonai Mitchell and John Mechie, who they just acquired in the trade deadline as well. And a much less talked about trade compared to the one that Mitchell was involved in. Anyway, both receivers did well. And Breece Hall continues to play well, even though that killer fumble at the very end, where the Jets were driving and it looked like Hall was going to put this into a one-score game and give them a real shot to win this game. That pretty much killed all that and quickly. Baltimore did not look their best. The Jets actually did a pretty good job on Derrick Henry and kept things relatively civil. But ultimately, the Ravens were a little bit too much. And for the Jets, it's a pretty devastating loss in the sense of this was a winnable game, and they just couldn't get it done. Baltimore has won 5 straight, and they have found a way over 500. They have risen from the dead, and all of a sudden have a real shot to win the AFC North. How did Pittsburgh do? I'll talk about that right now. Let's talk about the Steelers. And it's a shame that Aaron Rodgers didn't play, because I was really looking forward to watching Rodgers play against the Bears potentially one final time and see if Rodgers could continue his ownership of Chicago. And as it turned out, Mason Rudolph had his moments, I guess. He wasn't completely awful and an abject disaster. There were worse quarterbacks who played on Sunday. But in the case of Rudolph, it just wasn't going to hit the same. In the case of Caleb Williams, it felt like at the start of this, he tried to give the game to Pittsburgh. Just a couple mistakes by Williams. The sack fumble in the end zone was also a really dumb decision. I don't know why he did that. But at least TJ Watt got to see his brother JJ call a sack that allowed TJ to pass JJ in terms of the most sacks in the family household, which is quite nice. That sack, fumble, touchdown for Pittsburgh gave them a shot in the arm. That fake brotherly shove or tush push gave them another shot in the arm, or at least a shot in the legs, I guess. But even with all of that, for some reason, Caleb Williams found DJ Moore very appealing to throw to. And DJ Moore was able to make the most of it and actually use his hands. Good stuff there. Chicago was able to hold this together, even with all the injuries they have at receiver. And the Steelers, DBs will never be receivers because pretty much none of them have hands. It just wasn't working out for them. Anyway, some Steelers play calling and decision making just did not work out at the very end. And for the Bears, they were able to survive in advance because of it. Mason Rudolph just couldn't get the job done when he absolutely had to. And with all of this, Chicago is now 8-3. They are now looking like a really legitimate squad to get the 2 seed at worst in the NFC. Meanwhile, the Steelers have been tracked down by the Ravens, and the Steelers' 4-game lead once upon a time is now no more. Baltimore has caught them. Baltimore still plays them twice. Again, those would be appointment viewing games because street fights are upcoming. But will Aaron Rodgers be around to play in either of them? We'll have to talk about that when it's time to. Let's talk about the Vikings-Packers game, and let's talk about how this whole phenomenon of J.J. McCarthy calling himself number 9, ever since that point, his stock has plummeted. It's Enron levels of bad. It's not going well at all. The Packers, for 2.5 quarters, I'll say, basically were in a fight with the Vikings, but I never got the sense that Minnesota was going to win the game. And then once J.J. McCarthy started making mistakes, we knew that Minnesota wasn't going to win this game. Green Bay was able to hold it together at least until the NOs started to pile up and the sacks started to pile up. Because once Green Bay was able to get home and they found a way in, it was not looking good for McCarthy and company. And it was relentless for Micah Parsons and the crew to get home and make sure that, this game is going to end really badly. And then we got to the point where the very end, after the last turnover, Green Bay forced with the skull collapse and the Packers fans doing the excellent trolling. I'm here for that. Vikings fans are clearly not here for that. There were some that got wiggled in real time. It was not great, but this was a really good performance by Green Bay's defense, who got back to the normalcy that we are, or at least were, accustomed to early on in the year. Good work by the Packers there. For the Vikings, season's looking like it's kind of cooked, and it's kind of done. But what about J.J. McCarthy's time in Minnesota? Is that running out too? Staying in the NFC North and kind of finishing it up in this division. So we got the Bears winning, and the Packers won to keep up and keep pace. Again, Packers-Bears still has 2 games left to settle some family business. And then there's the Lions, who had a game at the Giants I think we all expected to turn into a bloodbath. It wasn't. The Giants actually came out swinging. Jameis Winston did his thing, and Jameis Winston was looking real good. We got a flea flicker touchdown early on. We got later on from Winston a receiving touchdown off of another trick play that the Giants were pulling off. Mike Kafka was calling a good game, and everything was looking good. Unfortunately, there's one person there's 2 people that the Giants defense, and they're really bad in general, but aside from their pass rush is legit. Aside from their pass rush, can't really deal with. And they were Jahmyr Gibbs and Amon-Ra St. Brown. St. Brown got in where he fit in early, and then Jahmyr Gibbs took the sticks, and Jahmyr Gibbs was absolutely unguardable, unstoppable, untackleable, if you will. Gibbs was running past Giants defenders all day long, 200 plus yards rushing. He added in a bunch of yards receiving. 3 tugs were scored by Gibbs, and once in each half, and then one in overtime. It was quite impressive to see Jahmyr Gibbs absolutely destroy the New York Giants. Even with all of that, and it took the kick by Bates to get to overtime in the first place, and I can't believe he made it. That kick looked like it was going to hook right, and then somehow hooked in. And the game is tied, and now the Giants gave the Lions the ball to start the OT. Gibbs goes right to the crib immediately. Unfortunately for the Giants, they just couldn't match it. And Aiden Hutchinson calls game, and with that and another blown lead, it spelled the end of Shane Bowen as the defensive coordinator for the New York Giants. The Giants have blown 4 double-digit leads, and they've blown 5 leads overall that have you scratching your head this season. They basically have become the NFL version of Devin Williams. It is not great. You don't want to be the NFL version of New York Yankee Devin Williams. That does not go well. But what does go well for the Lions is this escape. And now they're 7-4. They will move forward in the NFC North. There is a monster showdown coming up in a couple of days. I will certainly be talking about it. It will definitely be one of the main events this week. There is something else for the Giants, though. They become the first team in the NFL to be eliminated from the NFL playoffs. I would have thought it had been the Titans or Saints by now, but nope, it's the Giants. The Giants are the first to lose 10 games, or the second, because the Titans did that, and they are out, eliminated from playoff contention. Who knew that the Giants would be the first out? And let's go to the game of the day, at least in the 1 o'clock format, aside from Giants-Lions, because that was the most exciting game of the 1 o'clocks. Chiefs and Colts turn out to be the most captivating in the AFC. Kansas City had to have this game, and it didn't look good for them to start this game, as the Colts jumped on them in the first half, and it was looking like, okay, Indy's going to roll once again, and the Chiefs are going to be in trouble, and that's going to probably be the end of Kansas City's playoff hopes and ambitions. But even with a 2-score lead, Indianapolis could not hold it, and part of it was because Kansas City did a great job on Jonathan Taylor. He didn't go off in this game. We didn't really have that big explosive run until the very end, where he had a chunk run. Aside from that, it wasn't really much coming from him. The Chiefs defense played tremendously well. And really in the second half, it came down to this: Pat Mahomes versus Daniel Jones. Who are you taking in this situation? The obvious answer was Mahomes, who made big throw after big throw, especially to Rashee Rice, while Daniel Jones and the Colts offense went absolutely nowhere fast in the second half. 3-and-out after 3-and-out allowed Kansas City to get the ball back, and with plenty of time to spare, get back to even and get this game getting closer to overtime. There was even a point at the end of regulation where Kansas City could have won it there, but Indianapolis' defense did bow up and say, no, you shall not pass. You will instead kick this field goal and go to overtime, where the Colts got the ball first. Unfortunately for them, they could do nothing with the ball. They had to punt it back to the Chiefs, and from then on, it was more of Mahomes to Rashee Rice, and Rice and company were able to dot up the Chiefs secondary, and that was blouses. Harrison Butker buries the kick, and Kansas City is still alive, despite everyone else's chagrin. I will certainly be talking about their game with Dallas tomorrow for Thursday, but for Kansas City, you've stayed involved execution, if you will, when it comes to the AFC playoff picture. For Indianapolis, you're 8-3, which is still very good. Unfortunately for you, it now puts you third in the AFC because New England's now got 10 wins and Denver's got 9. Yes, you have tiebreaker on Denver, but you're now third in the AFC in a conference where it looked like you should be the 1 seed. Not great, Indianapolis. Not great at all. Let's talk about things that happened in the 4 o'clock matchups. But before we do, we got to talk about another beatdown that happened. I'm going to need the kids to holler at you guys for this one.
Stop! He's already dead.
I appreciate y'all very much. And again, like what happened with Josh Allen, you could say the same thing happened with Geno Smith, just worse. He got sacked 10 times this week, and 3 of them by Myles Garrett, who, if he doesn't break the sack record, I will be incredibly disappointed. He's got 18 sacks, which is more than 3 teams going into the Monday night game. That's saying something. Actually, really, it's saying a lot. It's saying that Myles Garrett is incredibly dominant. He's going to easily win Defensive Player of the Year, and it needs to be a unanimous vote that he wins it, and the Browns are going to get nowhere close to the playoffs. Shedeur Sanders, however, well, he was good at points. He was bad at points. But I think the one thing that he gives the Browns compared to Dillon Gabriel and other quarterbacks recently between Shedeur and Baker, he gives them hope, which is something I can't say about the other QBs in between, like I've said before. And Joe Flacco. Joe Flacco also, he gets his flowers in Cleveland because he played really well a couple years ago. Anyway, the point of it is, Shedeur Sanders, there was some bad, no question. And there was some good, no question. The Jerry Jeudy fumble, question. Why? Why did you do that? That was incredibly dumb. But anyway, this ain't about Jerry Jeudy. This is about Shedeur being okay. It was nothing special, but he was at least okay. And then Myles Garrett and company being absolutely relentless and absurd to deal with. Again, 10 sacks in a game is absolutely ridiculous. It's completely stupid. Anyway, the Browns get the job done. The Browns win this game. And this spelled the end of Chip Kelly as the offensive coordinator. It's not completely his fault, I would say. It's just not much to work with outside of Gene T and Bowers. And once basically Cleveland said, we're going to make Geno Smith beat us, they said, yeah, bet. That there's no chance of this happening. That's effectively what happened here. Cleveland, you get your free win. Raiders, you look terrible. And you now lose Chip Kelly. But then again, that's probably a plus for a lot of people in Raiderland. I don't blame anyone if they didn't watch the Saints-Falcons game because not many people did, I'm sure, outside of New Orleans and Atlanta. And to be honest, this was a game that Atlanta probably should have lost. And I say this because New Orleans have so many opportunities on the board. Goal line stands deep in New Orleans, Atlanta territory. Missed field goals, at least 2 of them by the Saints. And to be honest, it felt like even and their offense really didn't do much of anything, which is the other part of this. The pick 6 was New Orleans' touchdown, as you can see here. And things just didn't seem to work out as well as they could have for a New Orleans team that never seemed to catch a break. And that's part of the reason why they lose all these games. Like, they fight in a bunch of them. They just don't seem to make the 1 or 2 plays necessary to get the job done in a lot of them. Sans the Panther game, which was wild. But in any event, the Giants game, where the Giants basically self-destructed, also wild. Anyway, Atlanta needed this win horribly. And Atlanta, even without Mike Penix, which is pretty much done for the year, even with all the situations that happened there with the Falcons and how they've self-destructed this season, they found a way to beat their arch enemy and get the job done here. Good job on Atlanta for doing it. I just think it's way, way, way too late to make the NFC playoffs, considering how crowded it is. For New Orleans, no, it's another loss on the ledger. There's just a lot of those this year. Not much else there. Again, like the Falcons-Saints game, I don't blame you if you didn't watch any of the Jaguars and Cardinals game because of the next game I'm going to talk about. In this instance, this was Trevor Lawrence being an abject disaster and getting away with it. This was 3 NOs, one of them returned back to the crib by a thick 6, and a Cardinals team that played pretty well for a decent amount of this game. Until for some reason Jacksonville got their act together, and it was Travis Etienne and company to really get the acting part together. Yes, Trevor Lawrence threw 3 tugs, sure, but again, he threw the 3 NOs, and none of them looked any particularly good. One was a good defensive play, and then just a couple of bad throws otherwise. And yet, Jacksonville was able to survive because their offense was able to withstand and come back, which I guess is good on their end. Parker Washington continuing to play relatively well. Jacoby Myers has been a decent new acquisition. They got him at the deadline, and he scored. And yet, we are going to look at Trevor Lawrence like, you threw 3 picks, and none of them looked any particularly great. Not great here. Yet Jacksonville survived. Their defense kept them in it. Jacoby Brissett had another big day in terms of yards, but that last play of the game was kind of weird, where he wanted to throw an NO and it just didn't work out that way. Still, in with all of this, another close loss for the Cardinals, which has been mostly the norm for Arizona losses this year. And for Jacksonville, it's another overtime win in the desert. Good work on your part, I guess. And you gain a game on the Colts, who you still get to see twice. And Indianapolis is going to have to earn the AFC South, considering they get Houston and Jacksonville a pair of times before the season ends. Indy, you're going to need all the luck you can get. For Arizona, your season's basically done because the rest of your division is absolutely absurd, and you're going to be picking relatively high in the draft. At least there's that, I guess. Now to the main event of the 425 window, Eagles, Cowboys, and it looked like this was the kids that were punching Cowboys players' faces like punching bags. So they're getting heavy bag practice and throwing hands. It looked like the kids were not predicting what was going to happen. They were spoiling it because a lot of the first half was Eagles dominated. It was A.J. Brown getting in where he fit in for once. It was Jalen Hurts doing his part and getting the ball where he needed to. It was the Cowboys making a bunch of mistakes in a very Murphy's Law style game. They had the roughing the kicker that led to the Hurts touchdown run, the first of 2, because the brotherly shove was the third one. You had the pick off in the end zone after what was a false start by Dallas, and the NO by Blankenship. You had A.J. Brown dominating a lot of this first half in a lot of different ways, including the first touchdown, because Deron Blank can't cover people anymore. And at 21-0, it was looking like, oh, this is going to be bad. And this is going to be a very good weekend for the Eagles and Eagles fans around here. And then the end of the first half happens. Dak gets a touchdown to George Pickens. Pickens was absolutely dominant on Sunday. And then the tide seemed to turn because the Eagles started self-destructing. Because the Eagles, who are incapable of playing a complete game, did what I would actually say. They didn't play a complete game. Too many turnovers, too many penalties, too many mistakes by the Eagles in general for pretty much the last, I will say, 40 minutes of the game, where the Eagles just could not get anything going. The Saquon Barkley fumble was ridiculously wild because he don't normally do that. He only had 10 carries. That's wild to me that he only had 10 carries and 20 some odd yards. That at least could be maybe attributed to the Cowboys defense getting better as Quentin Williams and Kenny Clark are handling business up front. And for the Eagles to fail a test where Jay Glazer actively said that they've been running the 5-man front for a lot of the last few weeks, and the Eagles were not prepared for it. That's on you, Nick Sirianni. You cannot do that. You cannot fail a test this big. Anyway, Dallas passed theirs, and Dallas was resilient. It wasn't just Dak and Pickens. Javonte Williams had a good day. CeeDee Lamb, when he was catching the football, was pretty solid. Ferguson was pretty solid. The Cowboys made a move, and they were making moves to get back into this game. They fought hard to get back into it. They ended up tying it with a few shenanigans that were in between the tying score by Dak, who ran into the end zone, and the last drive of the game. But we got there. We got there at the end, where Dak and company were able to drive down the field, big catches by Ferguson and Pickens, and close it out with Brandon Aubrey burying a 40-some-odd yard kick. And the Eagles losing a game they had no business losing, and the Cowboys winning a game they had no business winning. This was a really good, resilient win for a Dallas team that needs every win, every way that can possibly get them. I thought this was sink or swim time for the Cowboys, where if you lose this game, it's probably done. But now that you won it, you're 5-5-1. I think Dallas probably has to win 4 out of 6 to get some help to get in. And they won the first test. The next one's coming on Thursday. Dallas, you're going to need all the help you can get. As for the Eagles, you've given up control of the number 1 seed because there was one team beatdown that happened this week. And the kids are going to have to help the cause for this one, please.
Stop! He's already dead.
Thank you very much. And for Chris Collinsworth's 500th game broadcasted, this was a bloodbath. And this game was effectively over in the first half. This was quick. Matt Stafford and company were not merciless. They were just efficient. And it was Stafford to Nacua. It was Stafford to Devontae Adams, who scored twice. It was Stafford to Kyren Williams. It was Stafford to the rookies. It was this. Basically, anybody he threw to was a Ram, and said Ram was doing damage and doing work. This was a bloodbath and a massacre pretty much from go, and it made almost the entire second half garbage time. At no point in the second half did it look like the Bucs had any shot of winning this game. And then even worse, Baker Mayfield got hurt to start the second half, the end of the first half, I should say. And he had the one drive in the third, and that was it. And he might have a serious shoulder injury. We'll see if he even comes back and plays next week. Tampa Bay is going to need him because Carolina's basically tracked him down. More on the Panthers in a sec. But for the Rams, this was an easy beating, and the Rams have absolutely caught fire, and now you're the 1 seed. The real question will be for LA, can you hold it? That is the true question here. So that was the one team-based beatdown for Week 12. And instead, this turned into a Niner game that was at points. What are you doing? And this is for both quarterbacks. There were a lot of NOs here. There were 5 in general. There were 3 by Brock Purdy on 3 straight possessions, and 2 by Bryce Young, 1 grand opening, 1 grand closing. 1 to start the game, towards the start of the game, 1 towards the end of it. For a game where Purdy threw 3 straight interceptions, the fact that the Niners relatively dominated this game says a lot more about Carolina than it does about Bryce Young, than it does about Brock Purdy. It was a simple fact where it's like, oh, you can't take advantage of this for some reason. And for the Niners, this was a lot of CMC doing his thing as he played his whole team. This was a lot of Juwan Jennings who scored a touchdown in this game. And the rest of it was basically the Niners defense and Bryce Young giving them mistakes. This was not the most fun game to watch, to be honest. I think a lot of people would be probably forgiven if they didn't see it, because not much good happened from this game. Except for the fact that the Niners got the job done, and that for Tampa Bay's sake, Carolina did not pass them in the NFC South. Carolina and Tampa Bay is another combination that will see each other twice down the stretch. Before then, Carolina's got a matchup with the Rams that may or may not be good for them. I will talk about that game tomorrow. As for this past week, it was very strong in the win column for me. 11-3, and my overall record is 106, 68, and 1. Coming up tomorrow, Power Rankings. I gotta talk about all 32 teams, obviously. I already know how this is going to start. I kind of know how this is going to end, at least know my top 2 teams, because one of them was off in Denver. Where am I going to put the Colts? Where do I put the Eagles? Where do I put the Bills? And for that matter, who else is going to be entitled here? Because there's going to be some movement here. There has to be some movement. And there are some heavy main event style games. Which 2 games are going to be the title tier games of interest? There's a couple of them that are absolutely worthy. There's already one I'm going to put there. Bears-Eagles is obviously going to be there. But in the meantime, between time, you already know where I'm going to start this. Tennessee, you're the first stop of my next train of thought.